Good morning. You'll often hear ESG and sustainability in the same sentence. In some cases, you may even see them used interchangeably, but they're not the same thing. When it comes to disclosing and benchmarking data, there's actually an important difference between the two. Although the discussion among mining industry leaders, observers, and critics begin with sustainability, ESG's scope, practices, and relevance to public perception and the capital opportunities have led to a substantial shift in the way companies measure and disclose their ESG performance. Before we get started, let's talk a bit about performance and perception, because they can make a world of difference in the mining industry. Here's a graph from Standard & Poor's to understand this. It shows that mining and a couple of other industries are viewed or perceived the highest risk ranges for both environmental and social risk by investors and society in general. I've also identified a few other industries in red and orange on the right that are also seen as high-risk participants, but are perceived to be not a notch or two better than mining. Right now, I suspect that no matter how well mining quietly performs, the perception will remain that we are a challenged industry. However, with time and strong outreach and published operational efforts, including reclamation programs and reports on them, and especially without disastrous accidents, we can build strong, quantitatively positive records of ESG performance for mining. And the investment banking community and the regulators should begin to recognize that we are leading many industries with our ESG record, not following them. At some point, this will translate from the investor news columns and analyst reports to the broader news media, and I hope the public will eventually see and recognize this. All the planned and high-cost PR programs about mining will probably not dent the public perception of our industry. However, I believe that by impressing the money sources and the regulators with stellar ESG performance, this will translate, and we will ultimately shift the tide of public perception. So keep publishing those ESG annual performance reports and talking about the results as much as you hype your earnings and your production stats. And if you're not publishing those ESG records, get started now. And now I'll get back to the main topic. Sustainability can mean just about anything under the broad umbrella of doing well by doing the right thing. This makes sustainability as a word a convenient but inaccurate substitute for other terms like corporate social responsibility, triple bottom line, the old standby, green. Like green, sustainability is overused and is begging to be replaced by a more meaningful phrase in the future. ESG, or environmental, social, and governance, is in the 2020s the preferred name used by analysts in capital markets, by stakeholders, as well as social and public media. And I have no doubt this will change to another acronym in but a few years. This shift in vernacular has felt sudden to some, but it's really been coming for more than 40 years, when environmental responsibility became a pressure point for the mining industry. However, emphasis is now placed on all three phases of these pillars, not just environment, but includes consideration for society and for corporate governance. These pressures have caused adjustments, maybe even upheavals in the way companies now operate. The time and effort involved in planning and implementing the changes in mining's underpinning missions, strategies, operating philosophies, and corporate structure tells us it's time for companies to accurately collect, report, and act on hard ESG data. 30 or 40 years ago, how many companies even had environmental or community outreach departments? We had human resources, but not health and safety. And the HR department was there more to protect the company and not so much for the employees. So we're graduating from sustainability to ESG. Change is good. The transition from sustainability to ESG performance indicates a maturation of our business with real actions and measures for performance. As the industry becomes ever more sophisticated, we'll improve the way we collect and track the metrics and build ESG management accordingly. Sustainability managers often work on environmental programs aiming for results that can be tracked using familiar metrics like carbon equivalents, energy intensities, or gallons of water consumed. They engage stakeholders through surveys, campaigns, and marketing efforts. And they develop sustainability targets that may include aggressive carbon cutting or offset efforts involving all aspects of their organization. Until recently, the common trait among them was that the activities and results were generally qualitative. It was rare that a company could quantitatively track and manage ESG performance. As we get more sophisticated or mature as an industry, acceptance of standard ESG metrics will provide a means for measuring or quantifying the many aspects of corporate sustainability. ESG measures are also increasingly important metrics for society to improve its perception of mining, for governments to regulate mining fairly, and for capital markets to mitigate financing risk when investing in this business. Companies with high ESG performance trend towards lower risks, higher returns, and are more resilient in times of crisis. More and more corporate finance and mining is tied to ESG performance. Heck, in just recent months, notably both Newmont and Polymetal have agreed to financing terms that track their ESG performance standards. With leading ESG performance credentials, mining companies will find they have better managed, more efficient operating properties, higher employee performance and morale, and better reputations when attaining superior access to capital. ESG accounting can influence operational performance. And as you know, what gets measured gets managed. So what's next? ESG accounting is coming. Increasingly, companies will be expected to ensure that they have high quality, accurate data suitable for investment decisions. To achieve investment grade ESG data, companies must collect data that is timely, accurate, complete, and auditable. With this development, the question changes not so much from can you collect ESG data, but rather how meaningful and trustworthy are the ESG data that you're collecting. It may seem like a matter of semantics, but as the corporate world becomes more aware of the need to bring ESG criteria into business planning, it's important to differentiate between sustainability goals and ESG practices. Sustainability is the central part of ESG policy. A sustainable business will have an ESG policy, but ESG factors extend far beyond the boundaries of sustainability. Measurable is the key word in differentiating between sustainability and performance. The ability to quantify ESG policies using specific metrics allow investors to benchmark our performance. The scale and complexity of ESG criteria requires the development of ESG scoring and ratings as a means to rank our business on our environmental, social, and governance practices. So what's the difference between sustainability investing and ESG investing? Sustainability investing is based on a selection of projects that have a positive impact on social or environmental aspects, where a company is ready to sacrifice some profit for a clean environment. But is that really fair to your investors? On the other hand, ESG bases its investment decisions on a broader level, where in addition to the promotion of socially and environmentally conscious practices, it screens out those undesirable investments based on criteria such as the treatment of workers, ecosystem harm, community programs, child labor, among others. In general terms, ESG investing seeks to identify, measure, and rank business activities that offer desirable characteristics and provide improved financial and operational performance. These characteristics are broader than what is considered in sustainability. They extend to corporate governance by evaluating executive and directors' pay, diversity of boards and stakeholders, the treatment of workers, community engagement, and health and safety issues, among many other metrics. Here's an important question when evaluating corporate performance. Are there environmental or social externalities that are not accounted for by the company? Are there government or accounting risks that are not counted by the company. External ESG factors may materially impact your investment risk and reward when evaluating an investment. Our business does not operate in a vacuum. In an interconnected international economy dependent upon cross-border trade, complex supply chains, diverse work sources, and operations spanning multiple continents, companies are increasingly confronted by environmental externalities, such as climate change, water scarcity, and air pollution, as well as the social externalities that include community safety, your relationship with regulators, and the communities in which you're operating. Therefore, managing environmental and social factors must also become a measurable component in your corporate performance, as well as across the entire range of the mining industry profile. For the most part, all of these are what economists call externalities, which are factors not currently recognized as part of the bottom line cost by a company or its operations. Even today, many ESG externalities are not fully recognized in the all-in sustaining cost of some companies, and therefore they're not priced into the value of those companies. A company that externalizes the price of environmental or social issues pushes those costs onto the communities in which they're operating, and therefore, by definition, are over-monetized. Those companies are earning excess profits because these costs are not internal and are carried by society. Eventually, companies like this will be found out and will pay the price when the environmental and social costs are internalized to the company's income statement. And its investors will suffer as the true costs and the full cost of their operations are realized, and their market capitalizations will be adjusted downward to recognize lower profitabilities. How will mining get ESG right? As with everything in business, it starts at the top, or as it's said at the board level, the tone is set at the top. If the executive team doesn't walk the walk and doesn't talk the talk regarding operational and ESG excellence, the management and the workers from the office all the way to the mine face will not feel compelled at all to do so either. A one-size-fits-all ESG program will not fit the mining business. As you're all well aware, with the spectrum of scales and types of operations, and corporate activities and business styles that pervade our industry, the range of market capitalizations, our global geographic spread, the multitude of communities and regulators in which our industry interacts, and the myriad of ecosystems in which we operate, all these factors demand that corporate and project level ESG performances and programs have to be tailor-made for many mining situations and provide ample opportunity for crossover applications as well. So we're going to talk about ESG in the mining cycle now. Ideally, each link in the mineral chain from discovery to closure will develop ESG programs that define individual paths to sustainability that are functional and can be collectively handed off to the next link in the chain with a positive result. Unfortunately, the mining cycle is only half the story, but mining usually gets the entire blame. The other half lies with the manufacturers and consumers. What happens to the mineral commodity after a mine delivers it to the market is the other half of the story. I'll just sum it up by saying that a society that relies on disposable products made of mineral commodities needs to amend these patterns and push more of their waste towards recycling and minimize direct disposal. It comes down to the basic questions of economics, not social or political pressures. Can we develop technologies that can recycle more cost effectively? Citizens are not willing to provide forever government subsidies for recycling to achieve this goal. Recycling metals at its potential peak performance can probably only recover 50% to 60% of the easiest materials like copper, gold, and lead in any recycling process. But the marginal cost of each additional percentage point increase also increases the cost in a nonlinear fashion. Cobalt, nickel, vanadium, manganese may also reach these levels of reuse. Graphite degrades, but it can be synthetically produced. Important elements like lithium and rare earths are the questions. The optimal or economically viable recycling rate for these elements still remains to be seen. But back to the mining cycle. So exploration hands off to development, who then hands off to operations and finally to remediation. The goal is to carry off each transition seamlessly. If it's not done in this fashion, the stakeholders will recognize this disjoint in the program and fail to trust both the project and the company that's really trying to become part of their community. In other words, the local perception of the entire mining industry will also suffer. Exploration stage ESG programs address areas of first contact in terms of social, community, and regulatory interactions. And first impressions are crucially important. The geologists on the exploration team are really the first point of contact and should have some important skills in community relations and environmental stewardship, because it's doubtful if any project will have a full-time ESG specialist on an early stage project. The follow-up in gaining permissions from government agencies and interacting with private property owners and local governments and community businesses are all critical in building the social alliances that lead to the future success of the project. This is the grassroots building of a positive perception of mining, and the geologists, early stage contractors, and corporate representatives need to be fully aware and prepared as knowledgeable and as approachable corporate ambassadors. They need to be able to identify the formal and informal community leaders and community influencers. They need to communicate with residents when out of normal events are about to occur, like perhaps a helicopter survey or drill startup in a community. They need to be able to remediate fully after every technical program. They must be able to patronize local shops, cafes, businesses, so the residents have a chance to meet them, talk casually with them. These early contacts start to establish the company as part of the community, and getting off on the wrong foot will likely impair the project for a long time. Naturally, as the project advances towards development and more attention is brought to bear in terms of corporate dollars and people resources, the ESG effort also ramps up. New people come, and the project focus becomes more engineering and processing and increases the impacts on the community and the environment. The handover from an exploration lead to an engineering-led staff and program is critical, and the mantle of ambassadorship becomes even heavier. Staff becomes a key word here because the beginning of bureaucracy and hierarchy at the project level is becoming established. The top of the pyramid should be accessible, but shouldn't be the point of contact. The oversight and direction of the E and the S components will take a large role and will be led by a well-trained, experienced person with environmental science and social science management skills, with reasonable levels of engineering and geologic knowledge as well. This is a true ESG professional who's a key part of the project team. This person oversees programs and most often communicates on behalf of the company to the stakeholders. Keys to a successful ESG program at this stage are the ability to communicate with small and large audiences, the ability to adapt to and credibly explain the regularly changing dynamics as your project advances, and to bring forward community and regulatory concerns within the context of your corporate program planning and decision-making, so the project does not stall because stakeholders are surprised by a government announcement or a rumor and do not feel that they've not been consulted or informed. The potential for volatility at the project level is high during the engineering phase and will continue through construction because the project's fluid, and ongoing and updated technical and environmental studies can and will dictate modifications along the way. ESG will take a different look when the mine is in steady state production. At this stage, one would believe that the mining company and its team would have become well embedded in the community and contributing members to that community. Areas of environmental impact and remediation are generally well-defined and managed as a normal course of business. Keys to ESG include anticipating community needs, participating corporately and individually in community activities, communication with local government and media, and most importantly, avoidance of mine-related negative events of all types, especially any type of accident, human, environmental, or an unexpected consequence, while having emergency response and accident prevention protocols in place. As a neighbor, care needs to be taken to avoid detrimental rumor mills as well. Contributions to the community become public works, sponsorships of local events, employee participation in community support groups, perhaps even providing leadership roles. The company should know what the community expects and regularly provides formal and informal, local and big picture updates. Finally, how does ESG fit into closure planning and final closure? The company, community leaders, and government should have been planning collaboratively for this event long before the day that the first ore was excavated and processed, maybe even earlier. A key challenge in driving effective social transitioning during mine closure is that some companies and mines continue to view it with an outdated vision. They see communities as beneficiaries of the mine's generosity. A more constructive paradigm is to recognize that the community assets already exist, and they should be leveraged towards continuing economic and social resilience. This approach will significantly improve community self-reliance after the mine's closure occurs and provide much more confidence in the company itself. In addition to the community's existing infrastructure, other components of the mine infrastructure that can be preserved, maintained, and shared with the community after closure. It can be a win-win scenario from the remediation perspective as well. How can businesses refocus their efforts to attract new customers and clients? How will environmental impacts be remediated and improved permanently? What types of employment can be brought in as mining jobs are progressively lost? What needs to be added to the community to provide for sustainability? Long-term planning is key to successful, sustainable closure. More than any other aspect of mining, the components of ESG come into play when planning and executing an inclusive and comprehensive closure plan. The preparation and planning for mine closure is continuously and ongoing and doesn't stop with the completion of the closure documents that are part of your bankable feasibility study. Closure documents are ever evolving and improving plans that are implemented at the opening of the mine and continue to improve so long as there's a mine and community present. The company may no longer be involved, but positive ESG legacy depends on a successful closure. When a mine closes its doors, we should seek to create a livelihood resilience for the community that remains behind. Now we'll look at a few closing comments on resilience. Achieving environmental excellence is perhaps the most visceral, physically obvious, and easiest to lose if care is not taken. Failure in the E impacts S as well as the G. A poor environmental record guarantees a negative S, or social perception of the operation, its people, the company, and mining in general. A failure to protect the environment often has led to change in corporate governance through management change as well. Getting it right with social excellence is a steep challenge, but not insurmountable. How wide does the net go in terms of community and stakeholders? Our ability to communicate effectively, execute programs, keep our promises, and mitigate our environmental impacts all go a long way towards improving the image of mining and minimizing NIMBY attitudes, even when the NIMBYs may be distant NGOs, regulators, and politicians. The S of ESG is not just an activity for corporate headquarters or management. Each employee or contractor should be an ambassador for the industry, the company, and the operation, and each employee should be proud to be part of it. How will mining achieve excellence in governance? For mining as an industry, our boards and executive teams must know and execute on the many components of excellence in governance, finance, operations, and ESG. Governance includes fair compensation, health and safety benefits, consideration for inclusion and diversity at every level of the board and the executive suite, to the mine site work areas, to the lunchroom, and to the dry. Best practices in governance include proper accountability as well as ethical business behavior. All of these are measurable. The underpinning of strong and positive environmental and social components of sustainability lies with the best-in-class governance practice set by the corporation. In fact, I would go so far to say that if corporate governance is not right, there's very little chance that the mine will have a positive environmental and social approach to its business, and it'll be a failure from day one. Finally, mining must get its ESG future right. We as an industry should have as our goal to be the ESG leader across all business sectors by shrinking the social and environmental risk bars that I presented to you in my first slide. We need to lead by example. That's the only way that the social perception of mining will ever match our best practice in ESG performance. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I'm certain that you'll enjoy the rest of the conference that has been put together. Please stay healthy and stay informed. Bye now.